Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Let's Talk. And as you can see, with me tonight is Mikhail Kunneke. You would recognize him from my roasts on Sit Down and Lockdown. We do some roasts every now and again. And he's recently joined me on Let's Talk with a panel of comedians where we spoke about woke culture. And we'll be doing a continuation on that topic this week, Wednesday, where Mikhail will be joining us again, along with Werner Weber, Peter Sawanga, and Oba King Moreau will also be joining us this week talking about woke culture. Now, tonight, we're going to be talking about Afrikaans culture, which is obviously Mikhail is an Afrikaner, a proud one, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I myself am quite curious to know more about the Afrikaans culture. I am married to an English slash Afrikaner, and I know a little bit about the culture. I've definitely been around it, being in South Africa and, being at Lekker Braais and all that stuff. But I am curious to know a little bit more about the history, a little bit more about what exactly makes you, or how do you define an Afrikaner? And maybe we'll debunk some myths that are around at the moment in South Africa about Afrikaners. Already in the chats, we have Mr. Punisher who's joined us. Thank you, Mr. Punisher, for joining us. He says, away. And remember, guys, if you have any questions for us, feel free to ask at any time, please. Mikhail and I are more than prepared to answer any questions related to Afrikaans culture. If there's a myth you want to know about Mikhail, I'm going to give you a moment now to once again explain what you've studied. And you can take it from there.
All right, awesome, Joe. Once again, thank you for having me. It's a bit of a different topic, and I'm glad we can discuss it. So for those watching, I think I have one or two friends trolling in the comment section already, but I love them, even though they're assholes. Okay, so just a bit of background. Obviously, you've seen me enough on Joe's channel. I think I have a shack somewhere in the digital world on his channel, and I'm loiter here. Bit of background, I studied, all my major subjects were history and political science, industrial psychology and economics. And even though as a business consultant, a lot of the history and political science I don't use as often, it gives me good background to what I'm doing currently. And I've always had a love for history. And obviously being an Afrikaner and being a staunch and proud one, I've always enjoyed doing research about Afrikaners, reading books, and even if there's a good fictional book about the Afrikaners, always been very interested. And obviously the politics is, Afrikaners don't have a great track record with politics in general, but it's still historically interesting, and it's always still interesting to read up about the policies and whatnot. For everyone watching, I did tell Joe earlier that I'm going to just start with a little sweet disclaimer. At no point is the disclaimer to protect myself, because I'm an asshole and I couldn't give a shit. The purpose of the disclaimer is the things we're discussing tonight. Obviously, at some point, certain organizations and towns will come as topics. I don't represent them. I'm not speaking on behalf of them. What I am discussing is purely based on my research, my own emotional feelings towards them, and my interpretation of it. As I said, I'm saying this so that if there's anything that I say that is too much of a generalization, those people at least still able to dissociate themselves with what I say. So if I say, for example, tonight, all Afrikaners love the color blue, and someone took it very literal, and tomorrow they go out and they assume that all Afrikaans people like blue, then no one can point the fingers at me going, yo, but he said we all like blue. No, it's just purely, I'm speaking in general, because even though Afrikaner culture is a community, it's a grouping of people. It does consist, as with anything in life, out of individuals that have their own faiths and beliefs and likings and dislikings. It's just easier sometimes to speak in general because there's enough examples to cover and justify it. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. What is an Afrikaner? Well, it's very important to differentiate between an Afrikaner and Afrikaans speaking individual. An Afrikaner in its most simplest form once again, a generalization to cover as many bases as possible. Afrikaner in its simplest form is an individual that is Afrikaans speaking first language, most likely educated in the Afrikaans first language and of an Afrikaans home, raising an Afrikaans family, and normally would have slightly more conservative beliefs. And in many cases, those conservative beliefs are very much based on the Calvinistic faith. For those that aren't familiar, the NG Kerk is, there are many jokes about. The NG Kerk has always played a very, very strong role in being an Afrikaner. But you can be an Afrikaans-speaking individual, and you can be a first language Afrikaans-speaking individual and not identify as an Afrikaner. So I just wanted to clarify that people automatically don't assume that the one is the other one. The Afrikaners have a short but rich history. The language itself is probably only about 120, 130 years old. If you look at documents, even from the Second Anglo-Boer War, it was very much still in Dutch. The Kitchen Dutch, or which we know as Afrikaans, later on started creeping in, but it wasn't a language as such. Afrikaans really is a language the early 1900s, early 19 teens. That's where the language itself started coming through. And then it's a very difficult thing to say, but it's true. The Afrikaner identity as it's in itself is actually very much state created. The Boers that fought in the First and Second Anglo-Boer War, and many that were opposed to the First World War or our participation on behalf of the British, didn't really identify as Afrikaners. They identified as Boers, but not as Afrikaners. That was very much, by the time the NP government came into power by 1948, that Afrikaner culture, that identity was created. So it is a very much a state created thing. But it's actually fine. Culture needs to start somewhere. You have catalysts for different cultures. The only problem with obviously being a government created culture is that obviously there were quite a few things. I think the Afrikaners made two mistakes in history. Firstly is apartheid, and secondly Steve Hofmeyr.
Wait, so you're not a fan of Steve Hofmeyr?
No, and the sad thing is we'll be apologizing for Steve Hofmeyr a lot longer than we've been apologizing for apartheid.
Wait, why? Why? I thought he was like a national treasure to the Afrikaans community.
Yes, a flushing toilet is also in certain countries a national treasure. Doesn't mean you're supposed to be proud of it. No, do you know what's my problem? My personal problem, with Steve Hofmeyr is, from 1994, the Afrikaners as a culture, we've tried to stay under the radar. We handed over government. Many of us apologized. I think many still need to apologize for our past discretions. We want to go on and do our own thing. And in the past 26 years, overall, Afrikaners have been able to get along with the other cultures and races and work together, and at the same time still hold on to our identity. But overall, Afrikaners don't want to be in the spotlight. I don't think people understand this. Even before 1994, the only thing Afrikaner really wants in general is to be left the fuck alone. We don't like attention on us. We really don't. We don't like to be in the spotlight. So every time Steve Hofmeyr says something controversial, firstly, in the same manner that I'm speaking, obviously, a lot of what he says does not reflect the Afrikaner population in general. Their feelings towards something. So yes, a lot of Afrikaners, I myself, we bitch about the government and certain policies.
Doesn't he regard himself as like an Afrikaner? Like he seems to regard himself as like a true Afrikaner person. Like,
no, he does, but as with any culture and community and racial grouping and religious grouping, you unfortunately sometimes have a really loud idiot. He's our loud village idiot.
Okay, he's the crazy uncle.
Exactly. The thing I want to make very apparent is that, as with any culture, Afrikaners, we are flawed. We do make mistakes.
But,
we have our own.
I just want to know something. Is it because of this whole thing that happened with the DSTV debacle, or is it just is it his music that some Afrikaners don't like? Is it what is he just too brash? Is he what is it about Steve that some Afrikaners don't like? Because he clearly has a fan base. There are people that do like him.
He has a fan base. I don't think there's a middle-aged housewife in Sandton that does not have a crush on him. Because I will admit, when he was younger, he was a good-looking bloke, and he has a good singing voice. I didn't agree with his music always. I think the best thing he ever did was actually do a Neil Diamond cover, because I think his own material's a bit generic. And he has a big fan base, and because he's seen as a very proud Afrikaner, because he promotes culture and the language and the lifestyle, it's gone to his head a bit. The brashness is fine. We can deal with brash. We have enough other Afrikaans musicians and Afrikaner musicians and artists that are brash and loud and vocal. That's fine. He'll take a topic and then take it too far.
Yeah, well, Leon Van Rooyen says Steve Hofmeyr believes he speaks for all Afrikaners, which he absolutely does not.
And that's the one problem. It's because he has such a loud voice. Even if you are not Afrikaans, even if you don't enjoy Afrikaans music, anything Afrikaans, everyone in South Africa knows who Steve Hofmeyr is. So the problem is when he speaks, I wouldn't say people listen, but people hear him. And a lot of the things he says is more damaging to the current Afrikaner cause of let's do our own thing, be left the fuck alone. Then, like, he says something, and then the spotlight is on us again. Dude, seriously, we had 3 months of not pissing off everyone, and now you've gone and said fucking something. So that's the thing. I think he has great influence. I just wish he would use it in a more constructive matter.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask you something that might be a bit controversial now, but he seems to have quite a big voice when it comes to farm murders.
He does, but once again, he gets it wrong. You and I have spoken. I am very, very, very passionate about the case of farm murders. It upsets me greatly that it's overlooked. I won't go and see. That's no difference. I am in the camp where I feel that farm murders are racially motivated. I won't go into because just purely it's racially motivated. Steve Hofmeyr will do the stupid thing and then start shouting, no, but firstly, it's white genocide, and secondly, all black people are racist. See the difference?
Okay.
I've gone, it's racially motivated. He's taken the step too far and going, but it's a white genocide, and all black people are racist.
So he's like the crazy hillbilly.
Yeah, he takes it too far. I don't have a problem with not having a filter. I don't have one. I've never had one. I once had a coffee filter, but I don't drink coffee, so see, it's pointless. But if you're in such a public eye, you are bringing in what he does, what he says about farm murders brings attention, but it brings negative attention. Because the way he says it, people start missing the point and get more outraged by what he says. So he'll discuss, he'll say farm murders are bad and black people are racist and white genocide. So the things he's said, the outrage he's causes more upheaval than the point of originally trying to make that farm murders need to be discussed and solved. So that's my problem with Steve Hofmeyr. And obviously, as Leon in the comments said as well, as that he believes he's speaking on behalf of all of us. But not all of us voted for him to be the platform to speak on our behalf. So yeah, it's a difficult figure to work with. So I always feel that every time we make 2 steps forward as a culture, get along with everyone and do our own thing, don't upset anyone and be left alone, we take a step back when he makes a public outcry. And the DSTV thing isn't the first. He's been doing it for 10, 15 years, if not longer. So it's not that he's been a detriment from yesterday. It's been about 3-4 weeks ago already that he was a detriment.
All right. Well.
So that's unfortunately the case. But yeah, as I said, the Afrikaner, and obviously we're gonna have to debunk a few things. Not all Afrikaners drink double brandy and coke. Let's start. No, I know, right?
That's a lie, Mikhail. I'm sorry, that's a lie. I'm sorry. That's unacceptable. No. Every single Afrikaans person I've met loves brandy and coke. I'm sorry, but I've met a lot of them.
There are a few that would rather drink a good beer. They are one of the few weird ones up north that will do a double cane and cream soda, a John Deere, which is a terrible thing to drink. Short-term memory loss is the only thing I'm going to say about John Deere's. I think the one thing I can say is I think also all Afrikaners enjoy springbokkies. I think we can definitely go that far.
Yeah, I've always been off with that.
God knows why. I think we are a culture that constantly loves to punish ourselves, and I think springbokkies is one of those, because it takes about 30 to get drunk on, which is fine. But then a lot of throwing up afterwards because it's really rich.
Yeah, you see, even the Punisher says, "I can't hear these lies." Like, I think the majority maybe do enjoy their brandewijn and
Oh,
Coke.
yes, once again, the majority, but not all.
Yeah.
So let's start with the easy ones. Not all of us are from Brakpan.
Oh, thank goodness.
Thank goodness. If the thing is, it's weird. Afrikaners, we like to be left alone, but we probably the people that loves making the fun about ourselves the most. There's a reason why they are Brakpan jokes, because we love making them. And with every good Brakpan joke, there's always a Ford Cortina joke involved in there as well somewhere. Not all of us love rugby. I think that's the biggest shock to the system.
Yeah,
is that all of us love rugby.
That can't be true.
A few of us do enjoy cricket as well. I think many more of us. There are more South Afrikaners that don't enjoy hockey compared to those that support rugby, but not all of us are rugby supporters.
Can I go back to the Brakpan thing, right? So when I first got here to South Africa, I was told about Brakpan being like the place where, there's rumors of incest and all that stuff, and it's like the hillbilly country in a sense. In your best possible way, explain it to me. Explain it to me, the truth about Brakpan. Why is there this stereotype? Where does it come from?
Unfortunately, certain stereotypes are very much based on in truth, which I think makes it more painful. Okay, essentially, Brakpan is it's a mining town, so it's working class and lower middle class town. For many years, obviously now with past 26 years, but originally was very much a white town with lower middle class and working class miners. And obviously, in most cases, if you're a miner and you work on the mines, you're not the most eloquent individual. You don't really have elegance and charisma. So it was easy to make jokes about it because they're not refined. And that's with any culture. That's why, for example, people in the US that stay in the northern states, they make fun of the southern states because it's an easy target.
I was about to say stuff like what Jeff Foxworthy talks about in his stand-up comedy shows, the blue-collar kind of comedy.
Exactly. And Brakpan and many other mining towns, Orkney, great TV series, Orkney Snorkney. You would have to get subtitles, but it's a great series. So Orkney, Carltonville, Alberton, where I was born, also a mining town, and even the outskirts, like places like Boksburg and so forth. Predominantly, even 40 years ago, once again, working class and lower middle class, and obviously it's easier to have those stereotypes. And because those mining towns are very, very secluded with regards to the community, there's a greater chance that if you grew up in Brakpan in the 70s and 80s, you would most likely still die in fucking Brakpan in the 70s and 80s. So that was why the incest joke was very easy to make, because no one bloody keeps on moving. No one moves out, and very few people are stupid enough to move there themselves, but the population still remains quite stable. So there's a sort of a how. So
well, Leon here says Brakpan, the board on the gate says, "Forget the dogs, beware of the kids."
The scary thing is he's not wrong. For example, I love making Brakpan jokes, and there are many of them, and even you can do one now. The punchline will probably still have the same kick 20 gigs down the line.
Well, Leon says a guy and his wife got divorced the other day, but it's fine. They're still brother and sister. So that's kind of the reoccurring thing, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and believe it or not, we have thousands of those. Okay. I'll probably upset someone in Brakpan, but how do you? What does a Brakpan rugby player do after he scored? He climbs off his sister.
No, man. Yeah, okay, I get it.
So it gives you an idea. But essentially, in reality, it's a
It's like
mining town.
again, it's like that Jeff Foxworthy. You know, you're a redneck when, and then he always says something
Exactly.
redneck. Yeah.
And also, strange enough, the South African slang "zef," which obviously is being common, being slightly delinquent and whatnot, is a Afrikaner thing. And then in the 60s and early 70s, you had a model by Ford called a Ford Zephyr. It was very much a premium, lower middle class to middle class car. So if you owned a Ford Zephyr, you were pretty much it. You were quite settled as a middle class Afrikaner. And quite a few people on the mining towns, those that could afford it, would buy Ford Zephyrs. And obviously, Zeph is then a shortened term for the Zephyr. So that terminology is very much actually in Afrikaans in origin. Because even though you were in a mining town, you can afford a Ford Zephyr, you're still a bit Zeph. That whole thing about money can't buy class. But yeah, so otherwise...
I just want to address some of these. I see some funny things coming in now. So Willem Peters says, "Are those cigs still from his original stock, or is he not in South Africa?"
No, these are okay. Definitely not original stock. Those ran out about here by week 5. But Afrikaners have a lovely saying, "Boer maak 'n plan."
Yeah.
So it's an example of boer maak 'n plan.
That
No,
was
I'm not.
actually one of the first things I learned in Afrikaans from a friend of mine, Owen. He said, the first thing I'm going to teach you is this saying, Afrikaans saying, "Boer maak 'n plan." So that's a little bit of a fun fact. I don't know what Spiker Hunt is saying. Does
Spykerhond.
does the sheep also spread the rumors there? I'm not sure what he means by that.
Well, firstly, we're not Australian. We don't fuck sheep. Didn't you listen, Brockpan? We bang our sisters. Get your facts straight. We don't do sheep. We're not sheep shaggers. And then secondly, Brockpan doesn't really have sheep. You'd have to move more towards the free state. On the other hand, in the free state, possibly someone might bang a sheep because there's fuck all to do in the free state.
And then Cindy Bazato says 2 reasons why it's so hard to solve a Brockpan murder. 1, the DNA is all the same, and 2, there are no dental records.
Nice.
See, all the jokes are coming out now. So okay, so continue. That was just some of the stuff I wanted to address.
Once again, we have thousands of them.
Yeah.
But even though the Afrikaner culture as such only came to being in the late 30s, early 40s, I think we still have, there's still 50 to 60 to 70 years of history before Afrikaners as we know them now that we still honor. So very much the First and Second Anglo-Boer War. I'll get into that topic later because why Afrikaners don't like Soties. To this day, I'm not a big fan of them.
Once again, a Celti is, that's obviously
okay.
That's not like a nice term for them, is it?
Yes, but it's luckily for us, it doesn't have the same connotations as, for example, the K word, which is, it's good because the K word is very, very derogatory and very much an oppressive and degrading terminology. Where Soties is, calling an Englishman a Soti is very much just an Afrikaner thing. It's definitely not a slur that's been adopted by the community, the South African population as a whole. I told you earlier, for those that are watching that are English, I'm sorry. So Soti translates to salty. It's a shortened version of the word soutpil, which means salty penis. Because the argument was that English South Africans aren't truly South Africans because even though they have one leg in South Africa, the other leg is spread over the ocean, which is salty, and still very much at home in the UK or in England, in Britain. They've not really in the sense where Afrikaners, we are still we're still proud of our Dutch heritage, but we no longer identify as Dutch. Here by the 1920s and 1930s, you still found many English-speaking South Africans still identify as English. Obviously, that's changed over the past 90 years or so, but back then when that term was brought out, it was still a case of, are you really South African or are you truly an expat? Where Afrikaners were more like, have been more likely to accept this is our home now, because we come from it.
Yeah.
Because that's the one thing that's always saddened me is when a certain rhetoric, which does not cover everyone, but there's a certain loud rhetoric always says that Afrikaners need to go home. The problem is this is our home. Our culture would not exist without this country. We would have not existed anywhere else in the world. Our language comes very much from here. And that's why, once again, I clarified earlier the whole Afrikaans speaking. Kitchen Dutch at its most simplest form, when it was still a pidgin language, it wasn't even a Creole yet, it was a pidgin language, was spoken largely by the Malay, which later on we know as Islamic colours, and a lot of working class Dutch descendants. The Afrikaners were never at the top of the food chain from the beginning. I think very few people understand that we were farmers and laborers, working class people. Afrikaners are very much, apart from here from the 40s onwards, until the 1940s, we were very much blue-collar people as a whole. And we lost our wealth twice, whether that wealth was gained fair or unfairly, that's a discussion for a different day. But we left the Cape during the Groot Trek, or the Great Trek, which obviously the dates are a bit questionable because it wasn't on this day we're now buggering off. But most people argue it started in September of 1935 and ended in February of 1954. So you had about 18, 19 years of Afrikaners leaving the Cape Colonies and moving inland, establishing the Orange Free State, which was a standalone republic, and then the Zuid-Afrikaanse Republiek, or the South African Republic, which was, as we know, this is Transvaal or the Gauteng. Now, as much as we glorify the Great Trek, I need to give a little bit of a history lesson. Yes, the Great Trek in itself is a great migration. It was something tackled amazingly. Remember, you have Europeans with our pasty white skins, second, third generation, literally taking everything they have and buggering off up more north into Africa. For that's at that point very much North Africa compared to being used to the Cape Colonies, into the unknown, to establish our own countries and communities and whatnot. Now, that's very romantic. It's very, very great and respectable. However, many people that took part in the Great Trek left the Cape Colonies because they either had many outstanding debts and tax dodging.
Okay.
If you have a debt or you have taxes towards the British Empire or British-owned businesses, it's a lot easier to pick up your shit and move to where no one's ever been, because no one's going to follow you afterwards. I'm not saying all of us, but a lot of us were tax dodging. That's why we left. But in itself, it was still a very, very great migration, and it truly must have been amazing. I remember to really packing up everything you own with 2 oxen and a wagon, and traveling in families of 5, 6 families. No roads, no brush had been cleared, no trees, no foliage, nothing had been removed. It's literally traveling through a very harsh South African climate, and because South Africa has such a wide variety of climates and plant growth and stuff, it was definitely a case of every 30, 40 days you would have a change of not only scenery but terrain that you had to cross. And obviously we romanticize characters like Louis Trichardt and Piet Retief, who were the pioneers. but I think also mostly so because they're the first names to come up.
Yeah. This might be a stupid question to ask at this point, but I'm really curious. And Oba King's watching. Well, I hope he's still watching. He commented earlier. Thank you so much for Oba King for watching. And I want to take this moment as well to thank all of you for watching and for all the comments that are coming in. This is great. A lot of you are communicating and making jokes in the chats, which is great. Some of you are a bit rude, but I hope in a funny way. I can't tell from the text. But Oba King says, "What do you put in the biltong? That is that is our only kryptonite to Afrikaans people." And this is the question I wanted to ask: when did biltong come into like? Was it during the voortrekker? Like, I can imagine that maybe that would have been like the perfect time to come up with biltong.
Well, you're not far off. Okay, I told Oba King this joke earlier in the week. The secret ingredient is prejudice. But okay.
Woo! We mean we're friends. We're all friends, guys. Like before anyone loses their shit.
Before everyone gets upset.
Yeah.
It was a joke between Oba King and I, and he actually agreed with it. I joked with Oba King, if he's still here, I actually made the joke with Oba King that even though biltong is made with beef, it's very much a white meat. But on a serious note, you aren't far off. So basically, the idea of drying meat is not a new thing. I think mankind, when we discovered salt about 10,000-15,000 years ago, I think we've been drying meats, whether it's things like fish or beef or sheep. But specifically biltong, as we know it, was something we initially learned actually from the Sun and the Khoikhoi. Because we would come across them not only in the Cape Colonies, but we came across them as we ventured up north. That was a good way to preserve meat. And South Africa does have one or two salt pans and so forth. So it wasn't too difficult for them, or the communities we came across, for them to get salt, to salt the meat, to preserve it. But the biltong we know, the generic biltong we know, is very much a voortrekker thing, because obviously once again we would very much hunt meat while we were doing the Great Trek. Yes, obviously we took those that own cattle and so forth would take it along, but cattle was preserved for things like milk and so forth. And if there was a slaughter, it would usually have been for a celebration or whatnot. So we would hunt meat. The best way to preserve a 20-30 kilo springbok's about 20 kilos at most, completely slaughtered. But best way to preserve 20 kilograms of meat is to salt it. And then obviously we did, as time progressed, we started adding certain herbs and spices to our biltong recipes. But biltong, as we know it, is very much a voortrekker thing. But once again, it was a raw skill we acquired from the Sun. We just made it Afrikaans or boere. So,
not to be confused with jerky.
No, beef jerky is a horrible fucking thing. I have no idea why no one bombed the shit out of your stupid little fucking orange man-led country because of that bullshit. People have been killed for less.
I know just the buttons to press with Mikhail. No, I agree. Biltong is when I first got here, I didn't like it, but then it kind of grew on me, and now I can't have enough of this stuff. I love it so much, especially.
That's how we draw you in. It's our cookies.
Yeah, the wet biltong is definitely my favorite, and kudu I definitely enjoy as well. So continue. You were on the voortrekker. You Afrikaners started to travel up north to evade taxes. Tell us.
Yeah, basically. Or most of them. Most of them for tag dodging. So obviously we moved into Natal, and we had the lovely Dingaan thing, which we can get into later. And then we established the Orange Free State as a republic and the Transvaal as a free state. Now, initially, neither of these republics were actually successful. They were very much farming communities. Johannesburg and those cities, the metropolis we know up there now, and even the Free State wasn't cities. It was small farming towns. And in the beginning, we struggled, because the problem is, as much as we love saying that Afrikaners are great farmers, and we've proven that we're great farmers, remember the people that initially moved from the Cape Colonies were not farmers. Now they suddenly had to learn to farm. So farming was only really successful here by the second or third generation within those republics. And it went a bit difficult. Obviously, it was a lot easier with the discovery of obviously the diamonds were still in the Northern Cape, and then later on with the gold and the Transvaal discovery of gold in 1886. That's when the cities really started, because people had a gold rush. But initially, the republics had essentially debt within their own republics, because the crops failed, and the cattle farming wasn't as successful and so forth, because it was a new skill to learn. Afrikaners being good farmers in general was learned by a lot of hard knocks. I think in general Afrikaners, once again I'm speaking from my own experience and research, I think the sad thing is the only way an Afrikaner really learns and adapts is by getting hard knocks. You can't really teach an Afrikaner something with soft gloves. We need a few knocks from life before we adapt and learn that skill and realize that we need to do it. And obviously you had the first Anglo-Boer War and the second Anglo-Boer War, where I think very much a great hatred, I don't know, I wouldn't say hatred, I think just a distrust for English-speaking South Africans came from, because my people were put into concentration camps. I do have so between the second Anglo-Boer War was between the 11th of October 1898 and it ended on 31 May 1902. And initially we were very successful, because we made use of commandos, and South African Boers, and later on who knows Afrikaners, we laid the foundation work for guerrilla warfare, because that was the only way to tackle a much larger British force. So on 16 June of 1900, Lord Kitchener passed the Scorched Earth policy. So 16 June, I know, is a public holiday in SA, and a very important one, but a lot of Afrikaners will refer to the 16th of June more because of the day Scorched Earth policy was implemented, rather than it being, I think, Youth Day, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And it's not because we staunch racists. Firstly, not all of us, we aren't. Not all of us are staunch racists. We just want to be left alone. But the Scorched Earth policy was essentially very much a case of Afrikaner women and children were placed into concentration camps. People of color, farm workers of color that showed solidarity with the Boers, were placed into concentration camps. And then, because the Boers used guerrilla warfare, they were very dependent on farms as essentially replenishing stations. So they would go from farm to gear up and get food and whatnot, which is a nice little supply train. So Lord Kitchener, the farms would be taken away. Afrikaner farms would be taken away and given to the state. And those that didn't comply, the farms were burned down, hence Scorched Earth. Now, here are the casualties. 46,000.
Sure.
370 civilian casualties. 26,370 Boer women and children died in concentration camps. 20,000 plus people of color that were farm supporters were also placed in separate concentration camps. Now it gets better. Apart from the fact that the English did it 39 years before the Germans ever thought of it, Afrikaner women were beaten and raped by British soldiers. Children were starved and molested. And many people of color, mostly if you look at places like the Free State and the Transvaal, more predominantly black than colored, for example, a lot of them that showed solidarity and resistance on behalf of these Afrikaner families that had been working for over generations, the men were castrated.
Shit.
And the Anglo-Boer War ended 118 years ago, and the British Empire Parliament has still not said sorry about it.
Really?
There's never been a letter, a public statement ever in the 118 years that have passed as the United Kingdom, the English aristocracy, or Parliament ever asked for forgiveness for the concentration camps.
Wow.
And the fact that our farms and our wealth was just easily, freely taken. So it is still very much a sensitive subject. So in the past 13 years, the fact that we beat the English in 2 Rugby World Cups is sort of a consolation win for us. So that's why with many Afrikaners, we don't have mind having English friends, but a stranger, and stranger in the sense of an English-speaking person you don't know, there's a bit of a first need to check out.
I gotta be honest, man. When I first got here to South Africa, I often heard how Afrikaners don't like the English, but I never understood it. Because, I mean, obviously I didn't know the history that well. I mean, I only recently learned about this history in the past year or so. And now when you explain it as well, it's sad. It's sad because I don't like hearing of any discretions or pain and suffering from anyone towards any race or fellow human being, and yeah, it's very sad. It's extremely sad that the British Empire or the British haven't ever apologized, and I can at least understand and sympathize with the way Afrikaners feel. It makes sense now why. Well, here's the thing though. Does this I don't want to say hatred. It's a bit of a strong word. Dislike or
Distrust.
Yeah, I think is a better word. Towards the English. Does this also apply to Americans? Because sometimes when I speak to staunch Afrikaners, they're also hesitant. I can feel there's a bit of a distrust, as you said. Is it the same? Do they put Americans in the same kind of boat?
It's. I wouldn't say that it's the same. I think the animosity, obviously, with each generation, it becomes less and less and less. So obviously, my grandparents had a stronger feeling towards the English compared than I do.
Yeah.
Obviously, because for example, if you take into account my grandmother from my mother's side, her surname was Ruus, which is the Afrikaans translation for rose, because her first ancestors that came to the country were English, but by the second generation they had become fluent speaking in Dutch, and was with many Afrikaners started more and more speaking Afrikaans, being Afrikaners. But by the Second Anglo-Boer War, they, out of fear, even though they were Afrikaners, in Afrikaans communities, in Afrikaans towns and cities, they had to change their surname from Rose to Ruus to avoid that animosity and stereotyping.
Okay.
And you can call it racialization if you want to. With the Americans, I don't know. It's a bit difficult. I think the distrust for Americans, once again, not everyone. There are many Afrikaners that gladly go over to the US and get employed as farmers. I think especially states like Wisconsin and Wyoming have a crap load of South African young Afrikaners about our age that are farming there and doing a great job, because that's what we do when it comes to farming. But that comes more from the border war. So what happened was, during the 60s and 70s, now we are all in agreement that apartheid was a very, very terrible thing, and on the one hand we've apologized for it, but I still very much in agreement, and I think a lot of the damage that was done has not been repaired. Once again, going into our current government not trying hard enough to help with that process, once again a different discussion for a different day. But the point being is there's still some scars and some open wounds from that. But you had the 60s and the 70s where the United States government, because of their own Jim Crow laws, in the southern states, were very much supporters of the apartheid government, and by extension, obviously, the NP government and the Afrikaner people. No, you're doing the right thing because white is right and all of that. And as public opinion changed, which it should have, as obviously, the Americans then went, instead of changing with everyone, they jumped from supporting it all the way to the drastic. They were the first people to implement sanctions or whatnot. So their moral stance, I think, alone was questioned. It was the same with the border wall. By the late 80s, they had a problem with apartheid and didn't have a problem doing government sanctions, but they didn't have a problem sending military advisors, as they did at Vietnam initially, with us up north to go see what the war against, because it was once again the war against communism. Our border war was the South African version of Vietnam. It was our version of the Russians' Afghanistan. Remember, this is a conflict that went on for 23, 24 years.
Yeah.
So that sudden change of polarization, I think that's where the distrust comes from, because yes, people change and opinions change, but your morality behind it is questioned. Are you against apartheid and because it's morally incorrect, or is it because you are a superpower? And obviously during the 70s and 80s, by that stage, it was the greatest superpower in the world. Is it just to save face? But you still don't have a problem when it comes to the military having dealings with us. You need to make, where are you sitting with this? So I think there's where a bit of the distrust comes from. But obviously that's not with everyone. I think it might be with most of us in our age, by our late 20s, early 30s, and obviously older. A lot of our parents served on the border. So I think by the generation after us, I think that will have, unless the US does really something stupid or more stupid, that will probably start dissipating a lot more. I think Born Frees, for example, I don't really think have a problem with the US as much. So I think it is largely maybe a 2-generational thing, and that's it.
Yeah, I have noticed that it is the older generation that have a bit of a, I was told by a few friends that, it's because you speak English. They don't like English speaking people.
No, the English doesn't help. It definitely doesn't help, but it's a different type of, you can't different types of distrust, but it comes from a different place.
Yeah.
But like I said, I think it's something that flared up quickly, but I think it's also a type of animosity that will die out very quickly.
Okay.
It definitely won't be something that's been held on to for 118 years.
Yeah. Can I just go to the comments quickly? There's a few people asking you a question. They want your opinion on a few things. I'm going to just go back a bit because there was a very nice comment earlier. I did show it on the screen, but I want to let you know. Willem Peters earlier said, I like Mikhail's personality. And
thank you.
That's a very rare thing for you to hear.
I'm going to screenshot the shit out of that. And then print it and then show it to my wife.
All right, so let me find this one. Here we go. Nico Jacobs, I hope you're still watching. Thank you so much once again, everyone who's watching, and for all the likes and questions that are coming in. Nico Jacobs is asking, any thoughts on Afrikaner leadership in the past or lack of great leaders now? You can make that brief. There's more.
Yeah, I'll try to make it brief. Afrikaans, we hit and miss. Obviously, it's very, very difficult to judge Afrikaner leaders, especially here from 1948 onwards, because the NP government came into place in 1948, and obviously in 1961 we became a republic, or very much a one-sided republic, but became a republic. And the NP government always had a strong hand in apartheid. So it is very difficult to measure a politician based on what they did and their moral compass. And we also, as America had Nixon, we had John Foster, we had literally our own intelligence scandal, and about the same time frame as well. So we've had our own Nixon, and then we had leaders like P.V. Botha, which is very much either you like him or you dislike him. Then you had Pik Botha, which I think in most cases are quite favorable. I don't think anyone ever, if you speak to Afrikaners, had a problem with Pik Botha. And if you go back a bit further before apartheid, if you look at leaders such as General de la Rey, Louis Botha, And then you have our own version of the Renaissance man. We had Jan Smuts, which was a great politician, a great general, great military leader. And believe it or not, there were talks within the English Parliament during the Second World War that if Churchill had to pass away, they would make Jan Smuts a British citizen and bring him into Parliament as the Prime Minister for wartime. Well-read, extremely intellectual. Obviously, my favorite part is he went to the high school I went to, so that's awesome. So pre-apartheid, we definitely have some great leaders to look up to. It's very difficult to measure our leaders during apartheid because it is a very dark and difficult time period to really look at. And then currently, and I think that's where he really... Currently, I think most Afrikaners prefer to stay out of politics. For example, Freedom Front Plus is purely a political party because people don't want to leave us the fuck alone. I think if after 1994, for Afrikaners were genuinely left alone to their own devices, Freedom Front Plus would not exist. The only reason they exist is to protect the Afrikaner because we are kept on being pushed into the spotlight even though we don't want to be there. But overall... Will we ever have an Afrikaans president ever again? No, never. And that's for any race. Once again, Afrikaners as Afrikaans speaking is a first language and sharing that beliefs and value systems. So, an Afrikaner, in sense, leading the country ever? No, I don't think so. Being prominent in politics, apart from the Freedom Front Plus showing growth in the last elections, no, I don't really think we'd ever. I think Afrikaner leadership becomes very apparent the more we start pushing for self-isolation and creating our own nation state. There's prominent leaders, but in politics as a whole, Parliament at the Union Building, no, I don't think ever we'll be prominent, and I think we prefer not to be.
All right. Well, Mr. Punisher also has a question for you. What are your feelings towards the French?
Huguenots.
Yeah.
Huguenots.
Yes.
Well, they fled Europe as Calvinists. They fled Europe to experience their religion here without any oppression and so forth. I think because they were such a small community, hence the reason why Franschhoek exists. I don't think in general, everyone hates the French because fuck the French. But when it comes to our actual feelings towards Afrikaners of French heritage, we think of them as the same. So if your surname is Duplessis, for example, or Legrancy, even though it should be in French pronounced as Lagrange. South Afrikaners with French surnames, you're like us. You are... Your great grandparents were French or German or Dutch, and with time you became an Afrikaner, and that's pretty much it. I don't think there's really any animosity between the French Huguenots. I think also because they fled Europe, France, to be safe here, I think their wishes were very much in line with those of the Dutch settlers. And the Boers later on. We want to be left alone and do our own thing. So I think that helps. I think that knowing that helped ingrain them into the Afrikaner culture as a whole.
Oh, okay. And Cindy Bazuta asks, I personally, I don't know the answer to this, and I think our friend Chris Wyatt would be able to answer this. Probably, he would actually know a lot more about this subject. Not to say that you wouldn't, but I know that you would definitely know.
Obviously.
But we'll answer as best as we can. Why did the U.S. do nothing to help Zimbabwe? The U.S. only seems to help when it suits them. Why did the U.S. do nothing to help Zimbabwe?
Unfortunately, the answer from my point of view and from what I've learned from political science is we actually did discuss U.S. foreign policy. So U.S. foreign policy is essentially how the U.S. interacts with other nation states. And specifically, we actually did go through U.S. foreign policy towards Africa. The sad thing is the Clinton administration had good US foreign policy towards Africa. They were a bit late to help with Rwanda, but overall, the Bill Clinton and his cabinet made an effort with regards to economics and social problems and political problems within Africa. Once again, I'm not denying that they could have possibly benefited from that, but there was an active interaction with Africa. You had conferences and summits and whatnot. And then by the Bush administration, with Afghanistan happening and Iraq happening, firstly focus, and secondly, even during his elections, Bush was never ever really focused on Africa and US foreign policy towards it. So Zimbabwe fell under the radar because it didn't suit the US and the US foreign policy towards Africa at that stage. I think if Zim happened during the middle of the Clinton administration, and I think if it were to happen during the Obama administration, I think there would have been a bit more of an outcry. I don't think they would have deployed soldiers or whatnot, but I think they would have been outspoken more. And by the time that Iraq had settled and Bush was getting to the end of his term, most of the flames of Zim had died down. It was still very relevant in there. My ex was from Zim. Her family was a family of farmers. They lost all 6 of their farms. Wow. So I'm very aware of, a good friend of mine's family are originally Rhodesian. Because of what happened in Zim, they will never refer to themselves as Zimbabwean. They will refer to themselves as South Rhodesians. Because of that animosity and what happened. So by the time it had started petering out and become accepted, because this is how Zim deals with shit, the damage had already been done. So obviously Chris White would probably answer this a lot better than I could, but this is based on the studies that I had to do surrounding it, and I'm not too far off the mark.
I think you're right. Again, Chris White would add a lot more meat and a lot more detail, but it would be the same answer probably. So some people are having fun with the whole American thing now, which I don't mind. I mean, I think it's funny. Leon Van Royen says Americans will say America say, where is South Africa? Seriously, the name is self-explanatory. Bush was too busy reading books upside down to kindergarten kids. So they're just having a bit of fun there. I'm trying to see here. I want to. Okay, cool. So we're actually approaching the hour already, and I really like to keep the shows to an hour. I know that you probably had a whole lot more to talk about, so I'm more than happy to continue this conversation on another evening, because I think you've only just touched. Correct me if I'm wrong. Just touched the beginning of this whole exploration into Afrikaans culture, and I'm very, very curious. So if you don't mind, you can we'll have you back, and we'll continue from I think we were after the whole concentration camps. From there on, we'll continue.
We could if obviously if you're willing to have me back, and if the comment section wants to know more, then I'll.
They seem to be enjoying it. A lot of people are commenting and they're having fun. Leon says, sorry, Joe, about the American things, but some of it is true. I don't disagree. I've met these Americans who think that the lions and elephants roam in the airports, and we have pet baboons in our backyard. Like it's not. I agree 100%. And I can take a joke. Have you never seen the roasts? Let's continue this conversation, man. I'm enjoying it. I think there we go. Some people in the comments are already saying Lucas Van Furen says yes, definitely. So let's definitely, and there we go. Mr. Punisher saying yes, please. Would be great to have this again, please. Lucas saying yes. So yes, let's organize for hopefully next week. I'll confirm with you which date, and we'll make Afrikaans Culture Part 2 the
Awesome. Is
continuation.
there one last question we could possibly squeeze in?
Even Oba King says I've thoroughly enjoyed this and learned so much. So no, that's wait, hold on. Kanye West is running for president. That's just a statement. No, it seems like everybody is just saying please do it, please continue at another time.
All right, awesome.
So yeah, again, Cindy also saying yes, refreshing chat, especially since I now live in Romania, and I don't chat too many Saffers these days. So of course, I think it's settled. We will do it again next
All right,
week.
awesome.
We'll continue from like I said, where the concentration camps, that stage in history, and we'll just continue the conversation. I mean, there's a lot more questions that will arise from that discussion, and we'll take it from there. Just let me see what they're saying here. Go for it, Joe. Another session would be great. Joe will tell you this: there is no more patriotic nation in the world than the U.S. I'm hoping that will spread into South Africa soon.
I think Afrikaners will disagree with that. But
yeah, that's actually true. Afrikaners, I think, are very patriotic, aren't they?
we are.
Yeah.
It's unfortunately it's become sad that a lot of us, not all of us, are starting to become more and more disillusioned with South Africa. So we tend to now slowly but surely more move within a patriotism towards our culture. And once again, to clarify, not all Afrikaners are white. You will find many, especially in the Free State, for example, many black people that speak Afrikaans as a first language and also raise their families in very much a slightly more conservative way. And a lot of colored people, for example, in the Northern Cape, that also have the same, let's say, value system. Obviously, that's very loosely spoken. That are also very, very patriotic towards the culture, our language, and our literature, and obviously our pride and things that we've accomplished and the things that we've done. So yes, we all fight for our language and our culture to the death, and sadly, it's not an understatement.
Well, I mean, AfriForum just won the case with the Afrikaans language, which is a great win. For the Afrikaans speaking people. I think that was definitely a good thing to keep Afrikaans language in the academics. Yeah, so Punisher says, I would like to know more about some of the battles that took place. So yeah, well, Mikhail's going to just go through the history, really, and at the same time explain, like we did today, just talking about, where did biltong come from? That was very interesting. I found that very interesting. And Gert van Rensburg says, still love my country, just not the government. Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with you on that. I definitely love South Africa, just not so much the government. Anyway,
yeah.
On that note, we will end it there. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys so much for tuning in. And we had quite a few viewers, so thank you so much. Please, if you enjoyed this, please give it a like. Please share it. I think it's a very interesting topic for a lot of people to hear. And you can see Mikhail's not such a bad guy. He just...
I have a reputation to uphold.
But you can definitely catch Mikhail with Oba King, myself, Venor Weber, and Peter Sawanga this Wednesday, 8:30. We're going to be talking about woke culture and how it's affecting the arts. That's going to be a very interesting discussion because all of us are comedians, and we're going to be discussing that topic, which is kind of a topic going around at the moment in our industry and in South Africa. So please tune into that on Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. and subscribe to my channel, and you will find out when we will continue this discussion. Like I said, it will definitely be sometime next week. So if I don't see you before then, ladies and gentlemen, stay safe, be good, be kind to one another, and I'll catch you at the next one. Once again, Mikhail, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Awesome. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.